It is Monday, December 5th, 2022. This is a special meeting of the Gettysburg Borough Stormwater Authority. Thank you all for attending. And I am now calling this meeting to order. I have no opening remarks, nor announcements. We have an approval, not of minutes today, because the minutes for November will be discussed at the next meeting of the Stormwater Authority, which is next week, next Monday at this time. However, there's approval of the agenda. If you take a minute, if you haven't already, to take a look. Does anyone have any questions on the agenda? Okay, not hearing any, I will take a motion to accept the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, we'll move right along. Thank you very much. Public comment. There is no public here today, not yet anyway, so we will continue. We have no current and old business. However, we do have new business, and this has to do with grant applications. And Chad, can you review for us where we are with possible grant applications?
Absolutely. So the way we left off last meeting was we had two options for applying for grants, and they're both H2O grants. One's a large, one's small. The cutoff is 500,000. So over 500,000 is a large, under 500,000 is a small. They also use the acronym ARPA. So these are funds that are coming from the post-COVID stuff. So our original thought was, since we had $4 million worth of channel walls that are failing, to use the large one for that, and then the small one for components of the Gettysburg Inner Loop. As we know, there's a lot of components of that project that are stormwater related. As we started to dig deeper into the channel wall thing, we've been doing an assessment since the beginning of the year. We started finding out that there's a roadblock with the ownership. We don't have that entirely determined yet, and you can't apply for H2O funds unless you can show that you have outright ownership or an easement over these facilities. It's going to take us more time than we have to be able to finalize that decision. The grant application is due December 21st.
Right.
So we just didn't have time to finalize that discussion. So what staff's recommending now is to flip those two. Instead of using the large H2O for the Tiber walls, we use a large one for the Gettysburg Inner Loop and the Chambersburg Street pipe, and then the small one for some of the walls. There are some walls that we are very sure that are in the borough right of way. We think it's close to $500,000 worth, which would be allow us to maximize the small H2O grant.
Right.
If we wanted to do that, we could apply for the small H2O grant for $500,000. There's matches on each one of these that are 50%, so keep that in mind as we move forward here. And then instead use the large H2O grant to fund components, water components of the Gettysburg Inner Loop Phase B project. So that's the skinny, and what I gave you tonight in your handouts here, there's a H2O funding strategy for the Gettysburg Inner Loop and the Chambersburg Street storm pipe. And let me pause just for a minute. So I did have a brief discussion with the Borough Council on Monday of last week at their workshop meeting, and discussed the Gettysburg Inner Loop and these H2O components, and the Chambersburg Street pipe that we all know is failing and has been an issue for many years, and it's a high priority for the borough and should be for the Stormwater Authority as well. So the council pretty much unanimously shook their heads to making sure that we add the Chambersburg Street storm pipe to the Gettysburg Inner Loop project. They kind of go together. When we do the analysis, we have to analyze them together because one project marries up with the other one, so it makes sense that you keep them together. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that this funding strategy that I'm presenting to you guys tonight does include that Chambersburg Street pipe. So
Can I just interrupt for a second, because the way you described, they shook their heads.
It was not a business meeting, so they weren't
No.
voting formally, it was a straw vote, like.
It was a
yeah,
it was a consensus feeling.
Yeah.
It was consensus by the board that we are on the right track and we should proceed. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, as you know, we don't own anything.
Right. the borough.
And therefore, any borrowing capacity does not come through the Gettysburg Stormwater Authority, it comes through the Borough Council. And so, you know, I think that's fair to say there was consensus. We didn't ask for a vote, we were informing them, and Chad did a great job of that, and so did Charles. So, I would say something about this page. Number one is, I think it needs to have estimates on, the word estimate on it. And second of all, you do have the date down on the bottom. Okay, good, all right. So, any questions so far by anyone on the board about this?
And so how this sheet works is there's H2O components and the water resource components of the Gettysburg interloop. And that does include a water pipe as well. We have to move a potable water pipe that GMA owns in order to be able to get our storm drains in and be able to build the Gettysburg interloop project. It also includes permeable pavers that we want to put in the alley, green tree boxes and some rain gardens and those things. But the big ticket item is this pipe that extends from Stevens Run. We had to bore it underneath the railroad tracks, which is expensive, and then to get us up to Chambersburg Street. And then you can see I just kept Chambersburg Street pipe separate, so you can see it kind of separately at the $230,000 for the total H2O components of 1.64 million. The other thing I wanted to say is, so if the Gettysburg Interloop project, the total construction of the project is only about 2.4 million in construction. So 1.4 million of it is directly related to H2O stuff. So that would, if we would be able to get this going this way, it would be a significant boost to that project. Because we can consider things like curbs as a component of the drainage system, because you need curbs to be able to channel the water.
So we're really helping out this interloop project.
And vice versa, yeah,
Right.
and vice versa, because there's grants that they got that we could potentially use as a match, that I'll show you here in a minute. So it's a perfect marriage with two projects.
More or less until now, in terms of stormwater or any borough needs, the interloop grants that they've gained have been able to accomplish things we would not have otherwise produced. So I don't hesitate with. My only question is well, maybe not my only question, but my first question is who makes the determination about who receives these grants?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I don't know if I think we should have some discussion on, and maybe Adam can help us steer that ship, but who is applying?
Is this someone at the state, or do we know?
I think, Chad, you're speaking as to who's the applicant.
Oh, yeah,
He's
I was-
No, I mean,
Right,
who
right.
makes the determination of who the recipients are? Is this the state? Is that the county?
I don't know that.
Okay, that's a curiosity of mine.
I thought
because-
these were county ARPA funds.
No.
They're
No,
not.
this is not the ARF grant.
The ARF, all right.
This
That's
is-
the
yeah.
other grant, yeah.
No, this is
There's-
going through DCED. It's
We have
going
so
through-
many grants going on right now, it's very
Yeah, no,
difficult to keep track of them.
There's literally about 24 that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
It's in the mid-20s.
Okay.
Different grants we're dealing with. But this one here goes through DCED at the state level. And so I understand that it was federal money that was given to the states to administer.
Right.
At this
Right.
point, it's considered by the state, but it's still federal money. And initially, we just got an email this morning from a person that helps us with grants saying that because it was federal money initially, we can use other state funding sources as matches, which is great.
And it's always referred to as the H2O grant.
So there was an H2O Act that this money has been given
Okay.
to.
That's what I'm
But
looking at.
they added the ARPA to the H2O Act to collectively have this grant source.
As I recall, just to add a little bit more color to that, I believe the H2O Act was passed at the state level back in 2008, and when American Rescue Plan via Congress was passed relatively recently, subsequent to that, the state legislature allocated roughly $150 million, believe it was under the 50, of that money to the H2O Act and the various programs that were set up by that. So it's federal money that is being applied to an existing state program and then filtering down to the local level.
Got it. Yeah, I like to sometimes read the legislation, try to get an idea of our chances.
Well, you know, it would be good on this piece of paper to say where the source, where we think the source is and who the recipient is. Because something like this we could use as a summary, because this is just the inner loop, right, Chad?
The inner loop and Chambersburg Street.
Right,
Yeah.
right, those are the two.
Yep, this isn't for the wall.
Right, so that's what I'm getting to next. There would be another section below this where you would talk about the wall.
Yeah, and we're gonna keep them separate.
Right. Or a
accounts.
different page.
Yeah, different page. yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
because I think as we, and the Borough Council, if I was on the Borough Council, I'd want to know what we're up to. Yeah. So what's the big picture? And so can you put something together for our meeting next week on the wall?
Yep. Yeah, and so the
Yeah.
wall's real easy. Well, let me just finish.
Well, before the wall, I had a question.
Go ahead.
So the interloop project, the what did you quote there?
2.4 million for the inner loop, and about 1.4 of that is
Right,
water related.
and that lives somewhere, that proposal we could look at? Just, is it on, has it been presented officially somewhere?
Yeah, so the master plan had been presented years
Right.
ago, but it's been going through half a dozen different
Yeah.
iterations with these different grant sources. So just last Monday, we submitted the most recent one for this ARF grant, the counties. So that is probably the most up to speed thing. It does live, and you could get, Carly submitted that grant. don't
Well, I
think
just
she
asked
updated
because if
it.
people are wanting more information, it would be good to be able to explain how the stormwater component is in this interloop. It has been in it for a while, and now we're seeing an opportunity.
Yeah.
Just,
Right.
if we get questions, it would be good to know where that, the larger project description exists and what's in
Yeah,
it.
I don't know if
It's a good
the
point,
intent-
Josh.
I'm looking at Charles here to see if, so many different grant applications, but just recently we submitted the GTRP, Vanessa did that, and then Carly submitted the ARF grant.
Right.
Those would be the latest updates to the Gettysburg Interloop project. Are those gonna be uploaded onto the website, or how, for Charles's point there?
But even the original master plan, is that?
The grant applications generally aren't
Yeah, not that. but-
uploaded to
Right,
the
right.
website, but we could certainly provide it.
Well, like what the project is, just,
Oh,
Yeah, isn't there an overview of
An
what this
overview,
project is?
yeah, something
Yes.
like that.
There's
You
a
mean of the-
master plan.
of
but
the
the
interloop?
It was
master-
in the paper, wasn't it?
The master plan
At
that's
one
on the
time?
website. I
Of the
believe.
interloop
But-
itself, you mean?
Yeah.
yeah, that's on,
on
that's,
Happy's website,
Happy's,
maybe our
yeah,
website
okay.
also.
I think it's on ours too. It should, if not,
All
we
right,
could
I'll look
certainly
for it
link
there,
it.
yeah.
Right.
I definitely downloaded it from
I'm
the
just not
website.
confident how updated what's on the website, that it's gonna do it justice to what your goal or intent with that comment was, to show these water, there's been a lot of updates since the original master plan.
Okay.
Do you know exactly what the stormwater components are of that grant,
Of the,
interloop grant?
yeah, so, yeah, I think about, that's what the sheet's showing, it's 1.4 million is water related components.
Yeah, but what is it though? We're building.
Yeah, that would be,
what's
that's a
That's
good question.
what-
That's the
yeah,
question I was trying to get at.
Right.
Oh, the
Oh, yeah,
permeable pavement.
I've got a big spreadsheet breakdown that I can send you guys as well, that has all of
That would
the
be
intricate
good
details.
to know.
Yes.
Yeah,
Just-
I know I've seen that before.
Right.
The permeable pavement and the.
Right, the
Yeah.
boring under the railroad tracks,
Pavement,
going down to the,
engineering.
not tunneling,
Three
but
different
digging
sides
down
of
to the
pipes.
Tiber with a new pipe.
Yeah.
Sure,
And
yeah, yeah.
one specific question, there is an issue around SCAP, isn't there? Is that included in this?
No.
No,
Okay.
no.
It was a-
So, any other questions on this till I get to page 2?
Yeah, so I
And
wanna
it may
make
be
sure
a
that
page
everybody
3 when I'm done.
understands what I have on the sheet. So
Yes.
what I'm trying to do is get a big high-level snapshot on this sheet. So I'm showing here that there's 1.64 million in the H2O that we could apply for in construction. The H2O only lets you use 10% for engineering. That's 164,000. So we add those up, you get to 1.804. The 50% match would be 902,000. I showed you these other 4 secured funds that I think that we could use as match, just added those onto the sheet today. after getting that email from Vanessa this morning. So I'm suggesting here that there are some potential up to $589,000 worth of grants that the borough's already, or the borough and the Stormwater Authority's commitments, that the borough's 80,000 and Stormwater Authority's 70,000 commitment towards the project already. So if you subtract 589,000 from the 902,000, that's where you get the 313. So basically saying that if you wanted to apply for this money, that we currently have shown about $313,000 that's unaccounted for, that we would have to come up for a match. Now, there are other grant applications that we're currently going after. So we just said there is an ARF grant that we just submitted last week. We cannot use anticipated funds as a match. It has to be a secured fund, so only showed here, and it can't be spent funds too. There's a dozen other grant applications that we use to fund design on this thing. We can't show that here. We can only show secured.
New money.
New money that hasn't been spent and is already secured.
Right. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the CDBG comes from the county to the borough? Is that the way that
Yeah,
works?
that's federal money, goes through the county.
To the borough,
To the
and the
borough.
borough has various uses for that. Is this been designated for this project?
Yep.
That's
The
earmarked?
borough has.
Yep.
The council's already voted on that,
Okay.
yes.
For
So
3
that's
years
it.
of it. It's 21 funds, the 22 funds, and the 23 funds. The borough gets 120-some thousand every year.
Ballpark, yeah.
Okay. So the 313 is what we would need to borrow.
If we don't
If-
get ARF money, or GTRP, or TA set aside, we have a bunch of other grants in the works.
Right.
Potentially not have to borrow anything.
Right, I mean, that's nirvana.
And how was the allocation from stormwater calculated, the 70K? How did we determine that that was what?
That was originally a match to one of the initial 12 grants, and I can't
Okay.
remember which year.
Yeah,
Charles.
I don't remember off the top of my head.
And we okayed that,
70,000.
Charles.
We're in the process of putting together an omnibus master spreadsheet that covers all the various grants and sources of money.
It was a match. 70,000 was a match to
Some-
another grant source that we
Okay.
used for the Gettysburg Interloop.
Right.
I just can't remember if that was, it was probably the C2P2.
It-
DCNR.
Yeah, we do have that C2P2 floating out there, and the 70,000's been floating out there on our numbers for several years at this point, so we do need to go back and refresh our memories on that.
Any other questions on this page?
I have a question. You say we're gonna go in for the grant. Have we clarified who's gonna go for the grant?
Yes.
Who?
We have, we're gonna use, for the big grant, correct me if I'm wrong, we're gonna use the outfit out of Pittsburgh, because we don't have time to do any of these things.
And when you say we, are you talking about the Stormwater Authority
Stormwater-
versus the borough? or
I
are you
think that's
talking
what
about-
Pat's asking.
Yeah.
You're asking who's the
Submitting,
applicant,
yeah.
not who's doing the paperwork.
Okay,
Yes.
Okay,
Mm.
who's the applicant?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's what I originally thought, that
That's what-
Wes might have been
sorry.
asking, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we have that identified. I think that needs to be discussed.
Okay, yeah.
The
Well,
answer to
same
that
time-
is yes. Yeah.
Well, yeah,
One, both.
Well, it's a fair
Oh.
question. The key,
Yeah.
the
What
key
does
item's probably gonna
do?
be if you have
The
to have ownership.
21st of December.
Well, sounds like we need to figure that out.
Yeah.
Pretty quick.
That's like, I can do math and,
Yeah, that needs to be, that needs to be determined kind of.
Well, what are the choices? Do we have choices?
Yeah.
Or if there's no choice, then we just have to
Borough or the
identify it.
authority. That's the choice.
And I don't see any reason why it can't be both.
It could be either. I
Right.
don't know that it matters. The only thing that would matter is when you do, if you would have to get a loan to fund the match, then I would think it would have to go through the borough, and the authority would have to reimburse the borough.
But I see no problem with the authority applying for it with the understanding that we're working hand in glove with the Borough of Gettysburg, because we represent the Borough of Gettysburg, and we are, pretty much the same entity. We are the action arm of the stormwater.
Yeah,
So,
my preference, I don't like dual applicants because then it becomes who's responsible, so I think there ought to be a designated responsible person that is the applicant. That's responsible, yeah, my statement on grants is getting them is the easy part. Then you have to administer them and do all the paperwork. And if you need a single line authority, I believe, to keep that clean. So, sounds like, to me, it sounds like we're closer to it than Charles is. He's got doing 10,000 other things, whereas we're focused on this.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem with the stormwater, putting
That
the
makes sense
name
to
of
you,
the
Charles?
stormwater authority on
Looking
it.
at the
So-
program guidelines, it'll probably be the borough, because
Yeah,
it says that the,
that's what I was getting ready to say.
it says any of the following entities who will own the proposed project.
Oh,
And I was just getting ready to
So,
say
like,
exactly what
GMA owns
Wes
their water
just said.
lines, but the stormwater authority, we know, doesn't own our pipes.
right. Okay, well, if that's the,
So
I
just
think,
glancing at
I
that,
think
that's-
your chances of receiving said grant increase significantly if the borough is the applicant, as much as there's a lot going on already. But to Wes's point, that it's very clear, and we've asked this question too, to get another opinion on it, that it's the same thing with the channel walls. It's the issue of ownership.
right. Well,
And the applicant must own the asset that's gonna be improved. And that's the way we're reading
And then,
the notice of
does
funding
that mean the borough's
opportunity.
gonna follow up with all the reporting and close that and all
Well,
that?
we would have to, we meaning the borough would have to, if the borough's the applicant. Now, that's different than the authority entering into an agreement with the borough to reimburse any borrowed money, let's say, to find the local match that's required, the new money that I just referenced a few minutes ago.
and I would suspect that since we don't have any employees and we're buying services.
Correct.
That the time spent on securing said grants would flow back to us as an expense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's all being reimbursed, but I have, if that's the way the grant reads, Wes, are you
You can-
okay, based,
Yeah,
our
you can even-
conversation with the
yeah.
borough? I mean, I think it was pretty clear they were on
Yeah.
board, but we didn't say that they were applying. I mean, in all fairness, and that's what,
I don't think that there's gonna be a problem there.
okay, well, can
I mean, I think
can
that
you
everyone
guys
that's
report
involved-
that?
Yeah, we
That
will,
we're
but-
we're going along these lines.
I think
and
everyone
We don't
there-
wanna surprise them.
Yeah, everyone from even our meeting prior to the work session was essentially on the page that these are something that the borough has to make sure it's responsible for, to the legal requirement, and
They
that
own
if
them.
they fall, we'll end up catching them, the
Yeah.
stones, so might as well deal with it. Literal
Or
stones.
channel walls.
Or channel walls.
Well, most of them
Okay.
are stone.
They are made of stone.
That's
So-
what I meant by the stones.
So it clearly then,
Large.
then the marching orders that the borough is going to be the applicant, and the stormwater authority, as I said, would be the arm of,
The financing arm.
the borough is the finance, I mean, we're gonna make it happen, but, they're the owners and they're the applicants.
Okay, so we have some type of an agreement unwritten, I think, like a memorandum of understanding of who does what here between us and the borough. Because Chad's probably end up doing it, so does he report to Charles or does he come back here?
Well, he reports to both entities, and you report everything to both entities, so I don't think,
Yeah, but somebody's gotta be responsible.
To somewhat answer that question and not in full, shortly after the authority was organized, there was a resolution that was adopted by the authority in conjunction with the borough that said basically the borough was going to do the services via some of their employees, and the authority was gonna reimburse them almost by an invoice. That was more of a payment arrangement than a who's responsible for what arrangement.
Okay.
In terms of a hierarchy or reporting.
Okay, the only reason I do this is I've been involved with dual parties involved with a grant, and you have to be really clear, because it gets confusing very quickly. And my experience with, if it is through, what's the agency over in Harrisburg that were going through
DCD.
DCD. My experience with them is it's very difficult to close them out. So, yeah, it's not something that's, you have to have
Yeah.
somebody really dedicated to that process.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think initially, the person so it starts with, the council, if that's what we decide here, the council authorizing the submittal of a grant application, which we are intending to go through this, Ms. McCusker, what was the name of the?
I forget the name.
Remember, but she would be submitting the grant application on behalf of the borough. Ultimately, if the borough would become, successful with getting the grant application, I've been doing all of the design of the Gettysburg Inner Loop. I would think that I would be also responsible for helping through this component of it. I work directly with Charles and Tammy on a weekly basis on handling 12 different grant applications that we have right now that we're using to fund the design component. So I would assume that that would be ultimately would fall, a lot of that would fall on me to help, I guess, see it through to the end.
Right.
Whenever we actually have to close the grants out, like you were saying.
And as much as possible, I mean, Deborah English will be helping out. I mean, she's not here tonight because she's ill, but she's going to afford the administrative support. So,
Yeah.
that's, it's going to
I
be at the
understand.
Stormwater Authority level. If I sat in the Borough
Okay.
Council, I'd look to the Stormwater Authority.
So that's the way it's gonna be, and the minutes are gonna reflect that, so we have it in writing, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, as long as we're clear.
Yep. Okay, any other questions about that, about this page? Because I have, go ahead.
So, just to kind of
Summarize?
wrap it up.
Yeah.
My understanding from what I'm hearing from this board is that the borough, as the owning party, is going to be the applicant, and there's going to be some sort of arrangement worked out between the authority and the borough, saying that even though the borough is the applicant, the authority is going to fund the match
Right.
for the portion that's unaccounted for.
Right. And be responsible for the cost of the work that needs to be done by borough employees or others in
Preparing that.
that and following through and
Administrative
and
closing.
closing out.
Very important.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you don't get your money.
Right. Okay.
Adam, can our grant writer contract directly with the authority?
Grant writer being the person that Dave Seitz suggested
Yes.
previously.
Right.
We have an estimate with a very fair cost from her, $2,500 plus
Right.
$100 submittal fee.
Right.
And I don't know if it matters that the borough contract with her and then the stormwater authority pay the borough back, or could the stormwater authority just cut the middleman out? And
I suspect she doesn't care as long as she's being paid.
I'm sure she don't care.
Right, but on the other hand, wouldn't it be the same? Isn't your person going to do the smaller grants?
Right.
So, I mean, I think it's open, you know, we've discussed it. I don't think there's a problem with that, do you?
Yeah.
You know, instead of contracting the borough, contract with us. Okay. Any other questions about this one? I'm interested in what I said before, page 2. With, and maybe you can explain, and we can get a page 2 in the future, about the other projects on, what?
Nothing.
The other projects on, on the table.
Yeah, so, and then I forwarded an email to you all on the 24th, I got it pulled up here. And so for what I was saying is for the small H2O, well, first let me back up. We have these other projects on the table, like Mike's saying. We have the walls on Bremen Coon Alley that we know that the borough owns. We have the Highland and John Storm Drain projects, about $335,000. We have the Long Lane project, which the Stormwater Authority's component of that is about $200,000. We have the SCAT project, which we don't even have an estimate for right now because we haven't completed the master plan, but that is on our long-term project list. And then we have other channel wall maintenance replacement. So if we know that we have $4 million worth of walls, if we're gonna tackle 500,000 of it, we still have $3.5 million worth of
Correct.
other walls that we gotta address at some point. So those are all the projects that we talked about. Out of those, the latter three, we don't know about ownership on. Long Lane, SCAP, and the channel walls, I'm fairly certain that there's pieces of those projects that are not within borough rights of ways or on borough property. So it really allows us to only apply the small H2O grant under $500,000 to one of two projects, and that's the Bream and Coon Alley walls or the Highland and John storm drain. We do have, the borough has Highland and Johns Avenue as a street replacement within the next 5 years. We would like to get to that, and Columbia Gas is aware of it. They want to do some gas replacement on those streets. So that is a project that is on our near list, I'll call it, not, next year, but within the next couple of years. But then again, we know that these channel walls are falling in. So that to me is still, it feels like a highest priority, knowing that the walls are actively falling in. We just got done fixing one a couple of years ago. So that's why.
And those are, let me just have, excuse me, those are walls that are on borough property?
Yeah. And in the bottom, down in that email that I forwarded to you was a synopsis from Jared Perricone, who's a structural engineer for
Right.
C.S. Davidson, that identified sections 5, 6, 9, on 9 segments 4 and 5 and 3. So he identified a few of those segments, gave us some cost estimates to each one of them, showed that they were in these plots labeled ADM-Aqua, AQUA. So we were assuming that this Aqua property is a property that the borough ultimately has rights to.
Right.
So anyway, so yeah, it's the piece, for the most part, it's the piece behind Bream Alley and the piece behind Coon Alley. Make sure I got that right, because I got it wrong at the council part wall.
Well, what I'm driving at is, what would be the next sections that we would fund from the grant? These grants, if we got them.
Yeah, so for right now, those are the only ones that we know ownership of for the small
Right,
grants.
yeah, forget about, because the ownership is a very thorny problem. But outside of the ownership, where can we use grant funding that we know we own these walls?
That's them. Yeah,
That's
the
them,
one. The
right,
Coon- yeah,
okay.
Coon and Bream, they're the only ones that
Okay.
we know of that we own.
And can you give me the dollars again?
It adds up to close to $500,000.
Right, and so that's my page 2.
Yeah.
That's my page 2, because then, then now the overlay is timing. What could happen, we know that the inner loop is gonna be out there, right? That's something that we don't think is gonna happen soon. So can we put an estimate on, a guesstimate on, if we got the money, in what order would we be doing these projects?
I'm not sure. So if we get the 500,000, the small H2O,
Right.
499,000, whatever,
Right.
it's gonna be under 500,000.
Right.
We would be putting it to the Bream and Coon Alley one. That's
Right.
just because that's the only ones that we know the ownership of.
We know that there are.
Correct,
Yeah.
right, correct. So I think we need to just make that clear, maybe at the next meeting somehow, but this is excellent. And what I'm trying to do is just to build the layers so that you can attach them to the minutes. So we know, we can go back and say, this was our plan in December of 2022. We know things are gonna change.
Yeah, would
But-
those be the ones that would have been number 1 and 2 on our priority list, not necessarily.
No, I
That
understand
one,
that.
You know, like the one between City Mart and, if that one I would've said would've been a higher priority than some of these other ones, but they all need maintenance.
Well, that's what I wanted to get into, and you described it well, a thorny issue, and I'm sorry for asking about it, but the larger concept of these walls, where we think we own some, or we know we own some, and we think the others own others, is there any value in seeing, like, because the walls that are gonna fall that aren't ours will need to be repaired by someone, and from our discussions in Planning Commission over the last 6 months, it's clear that some of these homeowners are not interested in doing that, or are in active kind of suspicion about whether they really own them or not.
Right.
So will it ever come to be that the borough has to say, we're gonna do this, or not? And I'm sorry, maybe I should have asked this earlier.
No. Go ahead,
But
Adam.
you're pretty, well, it raised a more basic question: can we do work on property that we don't own without
Yeah,
landowner
that's
permission?
that's a good way to
Right.
say what I was trying to
I
ask.
would not recommend it.
Yeah,
All right.
so it sounds like one of the priority items ought to be to establish ownership of the ones that we haven't already established. Otherwise, we can't do work.
Well, no, I disagree. I think where we are with this is that we have an opportunity to get money. I mean, that's what this boils down to. And if we can apply it to places that the borough owns, okay, and also set up a sort of design framework, which I think we have already sort of set up. It won't be the same in the whole channel, but if we did that and got money, this ownership thing is a hot political potato. And this is gonna take, and I mentioned it at the Borough Council, I said, Pat, that this is gonna take a lot of legal money, a lot of legal dollars to figure this out. And then we have to figure, then we have to make a decision. And I don't see, frankly, and I'm gonna put a time on it, I see that taking like 6-8 months at least. And now we have an opportunity to go after some money to do some good. I agree with you guys, it's not a number one priority, but I don't think we can let this opportunity pass without going for it and at least addressing the stuff that we know the borough owns.
Speak to
Okay.
your question. So, Mike asked that we try to get a grip on who owns these things. You know, it's a long stream, it goes through the borough, parts of it are channelized, parts of it are not. And I had our in-house title searcher, I picked 10 properties along the Tiber that have walls, and said do a deep dive on them, see what you can find. And then she also searched any agreement that was recorded in the name of the borough. Clearly, nothing was gonna be recorded in the name of the authority, because the authority hasn't been around that long, that would have established any sort of agreement relative to ownership and maintenance. So she searched for agreements, any sort of thing like that, that referenced maintenance of the walls, and found 2. Both of which were in the 40s adjoining properties. And that was all that she could find relative to, this is, you know, an agreement between the borough and this property owner, really the property, as to the borough bears some responsibility for these walls. In looking through those 10 properties that were picked relatively at random, some of them, it's consistently inconsistent. Some of them had their property boundaries by deed go to the center of the stream. Some of them stopped at the wall.
The consistency is, in all cases, the property owner owned the wall. Because if you're going to the middle of the stream, you own the wall.
Right.
If you go to the wall, you own the wall.
Well, it was actually at the edge of the wall.
Which
Yeah.
side of the
Yeah.
wall? I was gonna say,
Side of the wall, right.
Which side of the wall do you
Okay,
have?
Yeah,
well,
which
then-
side of the wall, right?
Then they don't, so, yeah, whoever owns the adjoining property coming the other way would.
Or end up mapping all that,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
what we're gonna do.
yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
I find it
GIS.
fascinating, among other words, that this issue has never come up before.
Yeah. Yeah.
that no one has ever said, hey, there's a wall in my backyard fronting on a stream. Am I responsible for that when I buy this property? I cannot fathom that no one has ever asked that question.
Right.
You know they have.
Mhm.
They have.
Of course.
And yet, apparently, there's never been,
Hmm.
I'll put it this way, there is nothing recorded in the courthouse, apparently, that establishes that. I cannot speak to whether there was anything that was ever done governmentally by the borough that said, we are deeming this to be a public concern, and even if it's on your property, we, the borough,
We're gonna
back in
fix it.
1890, 1930,
Mhm.
whatever year, that a motion was made or ordinance was passed or a resolution was adopted that said, regardless of whether we have an easement to come onto the property, we are exercising what I'll call eminent domain right and taking it over. That I cannot tell you. The borough has to do a deep dive internally to find that out. Did that make some sense?
Yeah, that's helpful.
Okay.
But I can have a follow-up, or Pat, you wanna say something?
Well, I was just gonna say it doesn't make sense to me, cause you go back to what Chad said, and my experience with grants is, you can't go out there and do work. They won't give you money to work on property you don't have permission to do the work,
And
so.
That's
Right.
why we're doing it the public.
You see,
Not the one that we
that's-
own.
Yeah, I understand
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
I'm fine with that. I'm just saying, if we wanna continue doing this, we need to,
Oh,
an
yeah.
essential
Oh,
step
yes.
is to establish this ownership, or eminent domain, one or the other.
Absolutely,
But-
Yeah.
and that's the, that's the problem.
And my question, I get your
Yeah.
point, we have access potentially to this grant money, let's do what we can and set a model for others. But if it turns out that our long-term goal here is to acquire this, or to, and I'm not saying that's what it is,
No, no,
or
no.
to sort of see a larger project, then is there any advantage to doing the larger project? Is there any cost savings in thinking about it as a larger project and not this piecemeal approach?
You are exactly where I was about a month ago.
Okay, sorry.
No, really. I mean, we talked about it. We said, if we're gonna be a bear, be a grizzly, let's
No,
go
right,
for
just
$5
do
million
it,
bucks.
Right, sorry, if I can catch up to you.
No, yeah, and so, but once we hit this issue of ownership, and it's clear in all these grants, you have to have
Okay.
ownership or ability to permit, in some way, easements and so forth. I mean, we're not even close to that yet.
Yeah, it went from, you'd prefer
That's
not to
wrong.
own them,
Right.
but the reality is, when they fall in, who's gonna be held responsible, and it's probably, you'll go through a bunch of legal wrangling, and we'll end up holding, what's left of it. So the money was out there, we said, okay, fine, let's do it. Well, then, we got to the point where, well, if you can't prove that you own it, you can't apply,
Right.
okay, so now we'll be able to take a much longer look at, and it sounds very much like a mixed bag,
Mhm.
what do we
Legally.
own, what do we not own? There was this, really emphasis on speed because of the grant application, but that's now not going to happen, so.
Yeah. See, we thought we
So
could.
we'll have to sort it out over, I agree, Mike, we're throwing numbers at it, but it could be, I don't know how many parcels there are,
Yeah.
and it could be very expensive to determine it, but we're going to have to.
Yeah, and some of the parcels, the wall on the parcel may have more value than the entire parcel itself with the house and everything. So it's a good chance that there's some property owner that just won't replace the wall if and when they fail. And then at a point it'll be a significant public nuisance where the stream will be flooding neighboring properties and it'll be a health, safety, welfare component. So that's the way, if we don't try to get ahead of it, that's what ultimately could happen if the borough doesn't just decide to take care of it themselves. But yeah, there's definitely an economy of scale thing. If you tackle a bigger project and get one contractor in here, because you have to go through the bidding process anyways, you might as well get much of it done as you can. You gotta permit it, you gotta get through bidding. So when you get a chance to do it, it's best to do that. But the problem is right now, we don't know if there's a big project to be had that we know we have ownership of. All we know is a small project to be had, which is under $500,000. So I think you're both right in saying that, currently the priority is to do the under $500,000 thing, but at the same time, we need to, if we're gonna continue with the other $3.5 million worth of walls, the next step, the priority is find out who owns it. And yes, we're gonna have to start, this is gonna be case by case, we're gonna have to start going through each one of these things unfortunately, and
Right.
it's not gonna be just a one-size-fits-all silver bullet here.
But you have them somewhat prioritized, right? So obviously,
Yeah.
Oh,
that's
the
the
wall
one we
section.
prioritized the ownership search for.
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah, and so that's, again, I made it clear to the Borough Council that this is coming up, and, you know, we're really kinda
Just one
doing
more-
it for them.
One more
I mean,
quick
for
question.
us, but for them.
Well, I'm sure this wall has been repaired in parts over time since it was built, right? I mean,
Sure.
And that's one of
so
the
how was that
concerns.
happen? What, like,
So, well, I think that's
So
one of the
go ahead,
concerns
go,
that-
go ahead, this is, you're asking great questions.
No, these are
we-
good
go
questions.
ahead.
This is one of the concerns that John was really getting into.
John Love,
Because
okay.
he was part of that at different times, probably from the time he was hired
Last.
through
Okay.
when he was running it, the highway department and then the borough. And basically, I don't think you're gonna get an answer to how does that factor into ownership unless we get into an ugly legal situation. So kind of the two scenarios that I envision with parcels where it's really gonna get bad, is one that Chad laid out where the parcel and its improvements are worth less than the wall. So that person lets it go, and if it impacts other parcels, much like a sidewalk, the borough could replace it and then essentially put a lien on the property, but, I mean, this would be so astronomically large that how would the parcel ever sell that?
Right.
And the other one, which is just as bad and fairly similar, is there are some spots where the wall basically supports foundations. So if you accept ownership of that, you don't have to, and then there's an issue when you're trying to repair it, and you cause damage to a building or perceived damage, then you have a whole mess with that. I think those are the ones where we'll find out. Because I don't think there was a universal, like the borough's repaired everything over time. I think it was like, well, here's a problem, so we're gonna
Right.
pour some concrete.
Right. And John mentioned this
Okay, last
at
meeting.
one of the meetings.
But the
that
number
they
of people
were in
that
the-
probably know
That
where,
engineer.
I would bet is pretty low.
That the number of.
That actually
things-
know, hey, we
Yeah.
did this,
Right.
we did that. You know, the number of parcels that have changed hands and the lack of, it's just been such a long period of time.
Correct.
Okay.
It's an extremely interesting
Yeah, it is,
situation.
yeah.
I mean, when there are, in fact, properties where the borough, or excuse me, where there is a building lying over top of the stream.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
We
there
have that.
again, who owns that?
Building owner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
That one's pretty easy
who
to
owns the
me.
foundation under
Yeah.
that building, which is the stream, walls, where the walls of the stream.
Like all one.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah.
Literally, yeah. Yeah. So,
Like I
okay.
said, I cannot fathom that this has not come up before.
Right.
Mm.
But
Okay, neither.
I'm sure it has, and we're still trying to look through
Meeting
borough
minutes. Yeah,
meeting
borough
minutes
minutes, yeah.
to
Yeah.
determine, you know, some,
Or planning
what
commission
courses of
minutes, too.
action were.
Planning commission minutes might be helpful too, for some redevelopment that's happened.
You see, that's why I say this is months and then months, and maybe years, who knows, God forbid, but, I mean.
Meanwhile,
this-
we're forging ahead with where we know the
Yep.
landowner, which is us.
That's
and the
right.
borough.
Yep, we're forging ahead, so, that we know. Any other questions about the grant application? Because we do have a possible debt service issuance that I wanna make a comment about. It's not a long-winded one, but then anybody can jump in. It's important to just point out that we gave the Borough Council a number, and I would call it an order of magnitude of how much we thought we would have to borrow, because obviously they need to know that, because they're the ones who are guaranteeing this. I mean, it's in their name. So we use the number $2 million. And I know it's not a specific towards projects and so forth, Counselor, but I want to say this publicly, because they, as the Borough Council, their consensus was, yeah, okay, we understand it could be $2 million. So as they make their plans for borrowing and financing in the future, I just want to make sure that we know and they know that in our minds, we may borrow up to $2 million. Now, that might change. I'm saying now, that might change in another year. I hope we don't have to borrow $2 million, and I would rather borrow actually $5 million and do the whole thing, but again, that goes back to our previous topic. Any comments or questions about that? Okay. I just wanted that to be on the record.
I think for now, to get to December 21st date, whenever the grant application's due, there will be requirement for, I guess, the borough in this case, to submit a letter with the grant application that they have secured the funds to be able to pay for the match should they get the grant.
Right.
So that will have to, there'll have to be a letter. Now, I don't know that there needs to be a letter between the borough and the authority that says we agree to reimburse the borough for that payment, but there definitely needs to be a letter that has to go with the grant application. So I just wanted to make sure that that's clear and everybody's understanding.
Okay.
Now, from what I understand, what the grant writers have told me is that it can be a letter from now. It can be a letter authorized by the borough, signed by the borough manager, for now, that we don't necessarily have to show, bank statements that we have the money in place, or that we're gonna get a loan to do it. We don't have to necessarily show that. We just have to say that yes, we are gonna fund the 50%, either through a match or with our cash if we get this grant.
Right. I'm sure that will be, if we get it, that will be a requirement in the future, but we'll wait and handle that. Okay, so Wes and Charles, and I guess in another sense you, Adam, everybody's good with that, only because your partner is the borough solicitor, and he's the one, or I don't know who will write the letter, but they know that that's a possibility. Charles will write it, so. Okay. Any questions about anything we've talked about this evening? Okay, everybody good?
Yeah.
All right, now, we talked about a couple of motions. One, a motion authorizing Gettysburg Borough Stormwater Authority staff or consultants to prepare an application for the COVID-19 ARPA H2O grant to fund water resource components of the Gettysburg Inner Loop Phase B project, including the Chambersburg Street stormwater pipe replacement, and to engage the services of outside consultants for such purpose.
So moved, is that what?
Okay, and I'll read another one.
I think he's giving us.
I'm not repeating that.
One at a time.
You are providing a copy, correct?
Yeah, we're gonna, hopefully this one.
What was the last statement of that?
Including the Chambersburg Street stormwater pipe replacement, and to engage the services of outside consultants for such purpose.
Outside
That's
consultants being.
this gal from Pittsburgh,
The
Area.
one we have the $2,600
the
quote from.
$2,600.
$2,500
Plus
a
$100 application fee, right. There's another motion here authorizing Gettysburg Borough Stormwater Authority staff to prepare an application for the COVID-19 ARPA Pennsylvania Small Water and Sewer Grant to fund components of the Stevens Run Channel Wall replacement and rehabilitation project, and to engage the services of outside consultants for such purpose. So that's the component that has to do with the borough-owned walls. Okay? Any questions on either motion? I'll take each motion separately. So the first motion was the COVID-19, the big H2O grant to fund water source components of the Inner Loop Phase B project. The motion is made, because I'm making it. Second?
Second?
Okay. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? None, okay, that passes. The second motion is authorizing the Stormwater Authority to prepare an application for the small water and sewer grant, as I read before. I will make that motion. Is there a second?
That clarifies what it's to be used for, correct?
Right, it is,
Yeah.
component of Stevens Run Channel Wall Replacement and Rehabilitation Project.
Yeah, second.
Okay. All in favor indicate by saying aye, please.
Aye.
No opposition? Okay, they both pass, and I will give that to you. Okay, give this to you. Yes,
Another meeting at 7:00.
get rolling. Thank you very much, I appreciate it. It's time for public
Drive
comment.
safely.
There is no public comment, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, second?
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned. Special meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.